Everybody say cheese. Cheese. Are we about ready? Is everybody pretty excited about what you've seen so far today? The message that Gisela's put out about the business strategy and everything that we've got going on for our online space. And of course, Gutham coming along and backing it up and showing you just how much SuperOffice has invested in online. There is no turning back. We are in a shift. We are transiting from on-premises to the cloud. That's not going to stop. So we hope that everyone here comes with us and enjoys the same sort of experiences that you've had in the past with us in terms of extensibility, integration, and those types of capabilities. Now, I don't know about you, but like most developers, I walk into the office every day thinking, this day I'm going to change the world. I'm going to write code that just is going to rock the socks off anybody that sees it. And then sometime after lunch, some other emotions start to set in. And then I'm not feeling so good anymore. But, there are those times when you're just sitting there and staring at your screen for hours and you're trying to figure out what's wrong because things aren't working. Jens, come on over here, help me out. What's going on in my installation? App ID's right, the app token's right, certificates are installed, why is it not working? Change that one character, right? And then everything starts working. And I still don't know why. That's pretty much any given day at SuperOffice R&D, my desk. But let's sort of just reflect a little bit because every Expander World, I spend just a couple of minutes talking about the community in general. I've been the community, the DevNet guy, the data guy, whatever. I've heard quite a few of them out there. So I do sort of like to focus on the community because that's you. You guys are the contributors to the site that we've always had. The forums, you are the forums. You generate the content. You ask the great questions. Froda answers everything. And then, doesn't even give me a chance to do my job anymore. No. But the community is growing. We spent quite a bit of time working on things in order to make it more approachable, more easy, easier on the eyes. If we go back and look at the numbers for 2008, they were really good. We thought they were really good. But as we go and we look at some of the numbers today, they're significantly higher. A few hundred back then was pretty interesting, for SuperOffice, the developer community. We had 12 key partners. And I think 400 community members where there was probably only about 20 or 30 that were continuously active. And it's kind of like the conveyor belt. You have new people come in all the time, but you also have older people going out all the time. So now when we reach closer to the thousands, it's significantly more interesting when you see more traffic coming in and you see that there's a lot of activity, a lot of excitement, some headaches going on out there too. But that's what the website is for you to help with those sort of problems so that you can get your questions answered. And hopefully that we've been able to do that, mostly. So in 2012, this is back in 2011 when I first started migrating from the old, 2000, the site that was created in 2005, looked like it was created in 1998. Brought it up to standards that, would put it into somewhere 2008, even though it was 2012. Anyways, we started introducing this sort of idea of clubs. It was no longer just a technical website for developers. It was, for technical consultants as well. So we were trying to consolidate all of our real estate out there, the web-based real estate for the partner.superoffice.com, the techdoc.superoffice.com, the devnet.superoffice.com, and put all that into devnet.superoffice.com, gave you the developer club, the technical club, and then you didn't hear about anything new for a couple years. And it's not that there wasn't anything going on, because there was a significant amount of effort that was going on to build up our internal intranet portal, our own internal club, which we call the Parliament. We introduced a lot of really cool features in there that you guys will start to see in some of the newer iterations that are coming out in the Customer Club. It was released, was it in June? So the Customer Club is out there to introduce. Today, it was presented a little bit, just a glimpse of Learn the Essentials. And you can see that it's highly focused on the users, because that's something our community sites never really offered, was a place for the end users to go. Your sites, your phones, your email addresses and inboxes, those were where the customers would go in order to ask questions, get their problems solved. So we've created the community site for all users to go and be able to get better resources, better videos, better how-tos, better introductions to the help system, so that they can be more productive, be more efficient, better, faster. I think that it's succeeding really well. We didn't want to sort of give you everything that technical and developer did, like forums and customers get their own blogs like other community members do, but that, we just sort of want to introduce that and sort of do a little bit of research in terms of exactly what it is, how we want that presented, what it is we're going to be offering, and how we want that presented. So does that sound pretty interesting? It's going to offload, I think, some support from your phone systems, your email systems. So I hope that you're going to find that beneficial. And don't be afraid to clap if that's something that's cool. When it comes to the developer community, right, back in 2005 when we first gave out the website, 2010, talking about Expander World here, some of the things that we introduced. Back in 2005 when we had Expander World, the SDK was the size of a dime, a quarter, a kroner, whatever you want to call it. It was very small. I remember when I first started in 2006, there was the COM SDK, which was about this big. And then you had the NetServer SDK, which was about this big. NetServer Services version 2.0 was out then. And you had OSQL entities and rows. And that's about all you had. Over the course of the next few years, come 2010, you had a significantly larger real estate, SDK real estate to work with, specifically with NetServer. We saw web services grow from 10 to 25 different endpoints and things that you could do within, accessing and manipulating the data outside of the SuperOffice interface. All of the entities and rows and lower level SQL stuff was all still there, but it was more abstracted and making all of our services and all those APIs available at a higher level so that our web client could go ahead and consume those and then create that web client. Starting off back in 2007-ish. So 2013, DevNet 2.0 launched, SuperOffice 7.5 came in. People started to see and start to use and leverage things like archive providers. Those were available back in, long before that. But it took a while for people to get their heads around how those things were actually supposed to work. Quote was introduced. ERP sync. How many people here have actually working with ERP synchronizer? ERP sync, sorry. How many people are working with our quote APIs? It's only a handful. Now, I don't know if it's because you're not actually in that sort of field, if that's not your expertise, but I can understand your reservations about getting into these sort of APIs because they added a significant amount of real estate to the capabilities of the software. It's pretty significant. It's as significant, if not more, than the archive provider capabilities gave you for accessing the data. 2015, SuperOffice 8, online first. That's a huge change. Not just online, but thinking about multiple devices so that you can access SuperOffice from pretty much anywhere on any device. Some of the newer online capabilities, I want to reserve those a little bit to later, because right now I sort of want to take you through a lot about what we've got going on with SuperOffice Online. Because as you saw or heard about from Gisela and Gautam's talks this morning, there's a huge investment that they've done here. And I want to sort of share with you a little bit just how big that picture is internally. So for this talk, it's long because I've got a lot of speakers that are actually going to come up and join me and talk about their areas of expertise, their areas of focus every single day. Jens is going to help me talk about the online environment. I want Mark to come up and share with you some of his work and the discussions and things that we've done inside monitoring and performance monitoring and just how big those sort of things are from our viewpoint. How does this affect you? Really what I think that you should take away from this is just how serious this really is. You know, we're not running online on, a server somewhere with, shared credentials or anything like that. I mean, it's very, very significant. If you look back to the early years, I think it was 2007, Gautam first talked about bringing SuperOffice into the cloud, 2007. It took a couple of years, but it was in 2009 we had our very first 6 customers running in online. In that environment, it was basically maintained by one guy, Per Christian Ida. He needs some recognition here because he single-handedly took what was our initial CRM or SuperOffice CRM Online and manually maintained it and managed it for the first year and a half without any tools. It started off on one server, 6 customers, and it grew from there. I think at one time it got up to 6 servers. There was some network load balancing going on. There's a whole story between when Gautam came in the office and said, guys, we're going to the cloud, to when Per Christian is sitting there manually next, finish, installing a website, manually configuring the configuration file for each customer, and then when SuperOffice released a new version, he'd have to go through and update all those sites, update all the config files, and he did this, for, a little bit of time until we got smarter about it. And we had to figure out all of those things that we didn't know. We had to figure out, what do we know that we don't know? Well, it's kind of a hard sort of thing to figure out. And you only learn by doing everything the wrong way, right? Hopefully you try and do research and you do your best to get it done the right way. And SuperOffice R&D is really, really good at doing that. So there was really minimal amount of mistakes. It was really kind of smooth and sort of a natural progression to get to where we are today. So where we are today, I can't even do it justice. So I'm going to go ahead and invite Jens on here to talk to you and tell you exactly what's going on behind the scenes for SuperOffice CRM Online. Jens.
You all know the products we have, sales and marketing, customer service or the service, and Pocket. What we do is we add on the next dimension to it, which we call the online environment, and that amounts to what SuperOffice CRM Online is. So the main focus on this environment is to support running the products we have in the cloud. We have to try to automate whatever Pekka is doing. Tony said it was one guy in 2009. It's now 2 guys running 3,000 customers. So some of the tasks that they used to do manually is now fully automated. They spend a lot of time on upgrades. They spend time on manually migrating on-premises customers to online and deploying new versions of everything. And we always had to continue fighting the cost of running a new customer. As we add customers, you cannot increase the cost as you do on-premises. We have to keep the cost down. And that's especially relevant when it comes to Pekka and the operations team, making sure it's only one guy now running all these customers. And even though we have 100 servers, 3,000 customers running, it's actually 30 customers per server. In on-premise installation, you typically have many servers per customer. So I'll try to give you a brief overview of this online environment. What you see in red is the products, and what you see on the green-blue side is actually the online environment. Year and a half ago, it took a couple of weeks to upgrade the environment. So one of the things we did last year is to make sure that we fully automate, upgrade everything at one time using the Octopus deployment tool. So these days we have 2 kinds of releases to online. We have the file set release, which is the products and some stuff, and we have the environment release. These 2 releases are released bi-weekly. So every other week we ship out the new release tested to the operations team. And I'll try to walk you through some of these details. Since we have 3,000 customers, we cannot have all the customers on one server. We have to spread the load out. And it started off by having a simple load balancing technology where basically we have the same IIS site on all the machines, and all the customers could run on any of the machines. As we're now getting too many customers, we have to spread out the load on different clusters. So in front here, we have a application request routing extension to IIS with our own business logic in order to route customers to the right place. And then we're, of course, routing the customers to the products at the same time as we're routing them to a whole set of other services that are in the environment. We have a set of background processing. Customer service, for example, requires lots of processing. Running the synchronizer in the background with ERP sync, running Saint and free text generation at night, those are things that are carried on in the background in separate processes. Typically in an on-premise installation, that is run inside the Internet Information Server process. So we have extracted it out and run it on separate machines. We have some other synchronization. We have set of background servers. So what we have done is actually isolate. So not many other front-end services can access the internal databases directly. So we have a layered approach where we have business logic in back-end services. A lifetime of a customer typically starts by being called into the supermarket gateway, which is basically where the internal systems talk to the online system, and it starts on provisioning. And that's where we're adding new websites, adding a custom database, adding a folder and document archive, and creating users and stuff like that. So all the customers have their own space and some isolation. So there will not be any leakage between customers. We have the login mechanism. From the Visma case, you heard that we integrated with Google. We also integrate with Office 365. So we can delegate authentication to many identity providers. We have claim-based security, so we could also integrate with partner applications. So partners getting signed tokens. And of course, logging into the application itself. For all normal users, the passwords are stored as hashes in the customer databases. And as you change your email address and password, the email address is replicated to the user master database. So when you log on, the login page will look up in the user master database, figuring out who can authenticate this person. That could be a customer database, it could be Google or somebody else. We have added the App Store this year, where we have a front end, which is the user interface that you saw earlier today. It is the back-end services, because we don't want the front end access directly to the database. And inside the same central database, we have information about all the apps and the security around apps. Some of you have heard about OC, or the Operations Center. Sometimes this entire environment is referenced as the Operations Center. We had an older version, which was intended for the operations team to use. We see that more and more people need to start doing self-service in the environment. We expect that partners in the not-too-distant future will start to be more self-servant when it comes to working with their apps, registering their keys, getting new keys. And so we know we're designing a new version of the Operations Center from scratch with better security and more catered for more user groups. On the web service running customers, we have an IS server where all the sites or applications point to the same folder on the server. So all the customers have the exact same file set. That means that what varies between customer, for example, which database you use, what is a document archive, what is a password, and stuff like that, it's treated through a separate service. So this is a kind of common cloud pattern when you want to try to move some sort of on-premise infrastructure into online, where you separate out the commonalities. So if you were to have a 2 GB file set for 3,000 customers, in an on-premise way of thinking, you would end up with 6 terabytes. The most single important thing in online is to have very fast disk access. And you have to do that while at the same time as you have a distributed file system. Access time on the file system is very critical. So by improving the access time on the SAN, we went from 1 minute to 10-second startup times last year. That means we're using some very expensive disk. And that is possible because we're actually sharing the same disk space between all of our customers. Those are one of the things we are spending lots of time figuring out in order to make it fast and efficient. So when we are doing a minor upgrade of a customer, only changing the web version, we're actually only pointing where the IS application is pointing on the disk, from one file set to the next file set. So upgrading a customer in a minor upgrade is very fast. That's why we can typically upgrade all the customers in a Tuesday night. If there are bigger changes, you have to make some changes to the database, and then it takes a little bit longer. But we're still doing, we could do all the customers in one evening. We have lots of background processing that you have to keep track of. eGeneral cron used to run every other minute for all the customers. It used to be that we had only a subset of the customer that had background processing for CS. But after we introduced mailings, now all the customers in effect actually have CS running in the background. So that means we, for now, all these 3,000 customers need to do background processing. So we have clusters of servers running background processing and tools for monitoring the current state of the processing for operations. We are running different versions of the customers at the same time. It was only until a couple of weeks ago we could upgrade the last 7.2 customer because of some legacy integration. We have still 7.3 customers and 7.5 customers in termination period, and 8 customers at the same time. The environment needs a generic way of accessing the customer databases. So we have created a set of services where we could do that. That is actually a multi-tenant net server running all customers on one particular version inside the same process. And you might think that, well, this seems a lot, right? Of course, you only have one of them. No, we have three of them. We have the development environment. That's where we are continuously making changes throughout the day. We have many builds of the file set. We have many versions of the file set and product. We are shipping new versions of the environment multiple times every day as we are developing. Every other week, we run a stable version and a more experimental version as we're developing or stabilizing. We have that in our bi-weekly schedule. When we finish making something in a development environment, we send it off to operations. Then they try to install everything in the staging environment, which is, from an architecture point of view, looking exactly like production. So then they try out and make sure that our product works in the staging environment, isolated from where developers can't touch it, before they actually put it into production. So typically, we release on Wednesday or Thursday in development, hand it over to stage by the end of the week, and next Tuesday is starting in production. And sometime around the weekend, we will also put it into SuperOffice AS. You also saw from Guttorm's slide this morning that we have an internal system. We actually have a matching internal system for stage and development. So we have separate super license, separate 1DB, separate supermarket, and everything for all three environments that we maintain. And that's the only way we could push out releases so frequently. So what are we working on these days? We are working on improving the APIs, adding support for REST. Christian Mogensen will talk about that later today. We also got some comments over the years that why aren't we using standards? Well, we are trying now to do some OAuth to OAuth in regard to REST. We're rolling out a new feature called database mirroring. Marek will have a talk about that tomorrow. We're trying to improve Operations Center to support new user groups, add a new security model, like a Sentry for operations, with new look and feel. And we're spending lots of time on the migration tool. So the guys working at that, Christian Mogens is working on the REST. Hans Oluf, he's not here because he's studying. He's taking a master's degree. Marek working on mirroring. Jan Yun over there is working on the new operation center. Ludwig is back at the office working hard at automating migrations. Lily is the QA responsible. We have Erik Legbuck as Scrum Master, and I do the architecture and other stuff. The drivers for the on-premise, the online migration is multiple. It is the single most time-consuming thing that the operations team do today. We also know that customers paying subscription is a huge upside for SuperOffice instead of only paying maintenance. And we want to try to make something that's fully automated and Uberified to make it so easy that an administrator could potentially do the migration himself. And finally, when the customer becomes online, and if you have an app in the App Store, you are getting more potential customers. So we have three new components. The Gisle slide from this morning was from that migration tool to the top left. And then, of course, you have the migration and the migration services, the same pattern as we do in order to make it secure. When we are migrating, we are provisioning a new customer. We are obtaining temporary licenses. We are exporting a database from on-premise, exporting a document archive, loading it online, overwriting the system, upgrading it to 8, and finally updating serial numbers so it matches online. Small tested databases takes for now about 15 minutes round trip. We hope it will be fast and even faster for small databases, and we hope to support large databases as well. We expect to have something in beta in not too distant future.
Thank you, Jens. Now you're either sleeping or impressed. Is there anybody here that's not impressed? It's kind of a serious thing. There's a lot of infrastructure. There are a lot of servers. There are a lot of services that are going on to make sure that we've got redundancy, we've got fail-safes, we've got security, we've got a lot of different things that are, a lot of different balls that are juggling. And believe it or not, Jens actually enjoys a small social life from time to time. But you can't have all of this infrastructure without having the ability to monitor it and be able to get feedback and roll that feedback back into the actual infrastructure for improvements without some monitoring. And for that, please let me introduce Dr. Marek Wilczak to talk about monitoring.
Thank you. Monitoring, what is it? It's actually a lot of things, and as with evolving the environment itself, our understanding of what monitoring means has also evolved hugely. There are a lot of different people, a lot of different actors in this system who have different information needs, who want to know different things about what's going on. You have someone in the data center wondering, do we have a CPU overload or don't we? You have someone else wondering, when should we order and set up a new SQL server? These things take a little bit of time. It's good to be a week or two ahead instead of being behind the curve. On the other hand, these things cost. And on premises, we can always tell the customer, well, you get some better hardware. It doesn't cost us anything to say so. In this case, it costs us exactly what it costs. We're paying. Our income does not vary with how much hardware we employ, only our expenses. The R&D guys want to know, is performance better in this version? Well, how do you know? How can you tell? Are any partners jamming us? I'm sure you wouldn't call our interfaces from within a tight loop. But there is always the theoretical possibility of a bug creeping in, causing you to do exactly that. And if by doing so you overload one of the servers that the customer is running against, then the consequences affect a lot of people. Let's say we had a glitch. Who should we call to tell them, there was a glitch last night. You have 7 mails that were not sent that you have to manually decide what to do with. We can't call all 3,000 customers and send them an email saying, we had a glitch, maybe it affected you, go and find out. How many users are online right now? That's the kind of thing that Gisle asks. How do you know with a web application? Hans Christian wants to know, are people actually using their free trials? Or have they just pressed, yeah, fine, looks good. 4 weeks later, oh, terminated. Oh, okay, whatever. So to answer all of these questions, we have to collect data in all of these places. And the short answer is everywhere. Someone is collecting data at more or less the hardware level. We look at the virtual machines, we look at the work processes. We have monitoring points, data collection points inside the applications themselves. If someone comes along and tells you, I've got this great monitoring tool, which will tell you everything about your application from the outside, send them home. It's not going to work. If you really want to know what's going on with your application, you have to somehow hook into it. You have the IIS logs, you have network taps, ideally, I would like to have a monitoring agent in the browser as well, because there is no substitute for sitting out there to find out, for instance, how long does it actually take to get the answer to a request? That cloud thing might be small and fast, might be big and slow. All of this generates a huge amount of data, which you have to keep somewhere, and then you have to distill information from that pile, which is tailored to answer the questions of all these different people. You know, the guys in pointy hats, like me. I didn't put my hat on because, you know, ceiling isn't high enough, but anyway. Support, the bowler-hatted people. I think you should get one, Gisler. You know, you would look great in a bowler hat. Now, whenever you talk about monitoring, someone is going to think you're spying. And I was born in Prague in 1964. The country was named Czechoslovakia then. And it was not a free country. It was a country where you were spied on, systematically, by people who did not have your best interests at heart. So I'm kind of sensitive to this. But to me, it's fairly simple. Monitoring is when you collect aggregated or anonymized data about how people are using your systems. And of course, you have to tell your customers there's a legal component to this. Spying is when you look at the data itself. So instead of counting, oh, you have 1 million contacts in your database. Interesting. If I start looking at which contacts are these, then I'm spying. And we do not spy on our customers. And we work quite hard to make it very hard for SuperOffice employees to cross this line. Jens, how many people actually have access to the online environment, to the databases? It's what, 3, 4? Yeah, I think it's 3 actually now. In the entire company, only 3 people are able to look inside a customer database. And that's not by accident, that's by design. Our own design, helped along by people like Christian from Watchcom, who is an expert at hacking us and showing us where we thought we were safe and weren't. On the other hand, we have to do extensive monitoring, because otherwise we don't know what's going on in the system. We don't know if it's working. We don't know if we are keeping to our obligations. We have service level agreements. We have other kinds of obligations to our customers. How do we know that no one is breaking into our databases or hacking or hijacking our servers? So monitoring is essential. Spying is forbidden. Now, is this big data? Who thinks big data is a good buzzword? Yeah, big data is good. I have to do big data. Well, currently we have about 700 million IIS log records, 3.5 billion performance stat records, 11 million usage stats records that describe something about how the application is used. But so what? When people say, oh, you have to do big data, and then you can, you get all kinds of knowledge. How do you do that? Statistical algorithms? Remember, these are people we are monitoring, behavioral patterns. It's not like physics, Every time you drop a brick, it falls, and at the same rate, you can measure it, you're done. You have a law. People's behavior is far more unpredictable, erratic, and spread out. So this is all about statistics, probabilities, assumptions. It's genuinely hard. And whether it's big data or not doesn't really matter. That's just a question of technique. Right? If you want to process 10 records or 10 billion records, you have to use different methods. Fine, whatever. So the hard part about monitoring isn't so much collecting the data as making a sense of it. And going from correlation to causality is even harder. I'll give you my favorite example. which is that the number of murders in a city is very closely correlated with the number of churches. And just to underline that this is not about a particular religion, you will find the exact same strong correlation with the number of mosques or Hindu temples in the countries where that is more usual. Now, why is that? Exactly, population size. These two variables are covariant with and dependent on a third hidden variable. And so if you want to trace from correlation to causality, you have to know the system. And we have some technical examples of that. I'll come back to that later, where we had to work for a while to find out. Our monitoring goals span the whole organization. And this is one of the cases that Gisle and Guttorm talked about the whole organization being influenced by this transition to online. Because suddenly we are hosting. We have much larger responsibilities. With them also come some large opportunities. For the customer experience people, they would like to know who is using what. And that helps them understand what kind of help they might give customers so customers get better use of the product. R&D would like to know the same, but on a slightly different level. But we would also like to know things like, what's the performance like? How is the performance changing with releases? The support people would love to have things like performance history, integrate an incident history, such that, this customer was the victim of a glitch in online last week that affected this and that. That customer was not affected by the same glitch because they were on a different path in the system, different set of servers, whatever. Operations, like Per Christian, still, two guys running the whole thing. They can't be just two of them unless they are kept up to date with what's going on, and even better, told, is it working or is it not? For you, I assume you also want to know how are people using your products, how much are people using your product, what resources are you consuming while providing that functionality. Product owners, feature usage, trends, managers would like to know things like the revenue structure, the trends, the churn. How do you recognize a customer who is growing tired of your product without waiting for the termination? And of course, we're learning. This is evolving, changing. Now, I can't give examples of all of these because I would be here all night. You probably wouldn't. So we'll go to some real-life examples. They are mostly technical, so it's just a small subset. It's real information, but don't try to read too much into it. Approximately the number of logged-on users throughout the week. You can say this is midnight to midnight, these cycles. It turns out, actually, that Tuesday and Wednesday are the days with the most users active. There are more users active on Sunday than on Saturday. And users tend to leave early on Friday. Yeah, big surprise, eh? Jens was talking about the footprint in terms of disk space. Now, disk is fairly expensive. What is far more expensive is server RAM. And so it's important to know what is our average footprint like. Now, by the way, average is a very dangerous number. Unless you have some kind of specification that tells you more about how is the data clustered around the average. Like you have half the people fail the exam, half get an A, your average grade is C. Hey, wonderful. No, it's not. You failed half. The technical equivalent of that would be sample CPU load over 5 minutes intervals. Sounds reasonable, right? If that tells you 50%, it could either be that the CPU was running at 50% for 5 minutes, or you can see what's coming. It was running at 100% for 2.5 minutes and then 0, because everybody gave up. One scenario is good. The other is a disaster. The average will not tell you which one it is. If you go the other way, you sample at microsecond intervals, the CPU is either busy or not. It's 1 or 0, and you get a colossal amount of data. So tuning in, how often do you sample? How do you know what your data means? What else do you keep to get an idea of, is this an average that is representative, or is it a number that's just meaningless? Takes time, takes experience. So back to this diagram. We are tracking every customer's work process. Once a minute, we are checking how much is it consuming, CPU, RAM, input-output, some other resources. That's why the database is so big. And then we have this nice tool called Grafana, which will actually, in real time, pull out like 750,000 rows, condense it to this graph, and do it in about 5 seconds. And this tells me that on average, for each day, each of these little lumps is 1 day, so you're looking at a couple of months. So you can see 5 working days, then 2 off days every week. This is how much RAM, on average, we're using on our web servers. Now, are the web servers happy about that load, CPU-wise? It would seem so. And I can, in this graph, I can change whether I want to look at the average or at the maximum within each interval. And those can be interesting comparisons. And you can see there's a riot of color because we have 20 of these servers. Now, you might say having 20 curves is fairly meaningless, but it's not. The point here isn't the rainbow. It's the stuff sticking out of it that's interesting. Now, do you think we do a recycle at 2 a.m. in the morning? Yes or no? This is the RAM usage. I do believe we're doing a recycle, which brings me to one of these analysis stories. There was a time a couple of years ago when we, at irregular intervals, suddenly had a huge spike in response times and loads on the system. And all the graphs just went bang to heaven. Like you had CPU load going up, memory going up, response times going up, database requests going up, through the roof. And then the question is, what is causing what? And ultimately, the answer was the request routing server recycled, redistributing customers across the web servers. And at the time, we had, I think, 12 web servers. So there was 1 chance in 12 of the customer hitting his old server that was warm, and 11 chances in 12 of hitting a cold server that had to start a new process for that customer, which is expensive. But it did take quite a lot of analysis and lining up the curves to see what happens when before we caught that one. This is how much database load we are creating. The peaks happen at night, because that's when we are updating the Saint and the free text index and running all the big maintenance jobs. So actually, if we are going to dimension our servers to handle peak load, that's not economical, because peak load is not happening at a time when someone is waiting for it and would be, in theory, willing to pay for it to go faster. As long as the background tasks finish in time, it's fine. And this is how many web requests we have per second, again summed over all the servers. And you can see the lunch. You know, morning, lunch, afternoon, then evening, and then you have the maintenance stuff happening at night. And you can see, I believe I don't have a calendar, but I would guess the 20th was probably a Friday or something like that. You can see after lunch, nothing much happens. Kind of tapers off. Which means if you are going to be evaluating performance, you cannot compare a Tuesday to a Friday, because the performance is going to be different, because the usage pattern is different. This one is always cool to show. Where do we have customers? Everywhere, almost. This one is nice as well. When you use the browser, it sends along a user agent string that, among other things, tells us your browser version, your operating system version. And so you can see the transition from Internet Explorer 10 to 11, that's yellow to pink-ish. And yeah, you can see Internet Explorer 9 dying out. You also see some jagged stuff, which is in the holidays. In the holidays, the user mix changes. You suddenly have all the Chrome users going on holiday. You know, summer holiday. Chrome users take more holidays than everybody else. It's obvious. I mean, scientifically proven. Yeah. So, is it because the lazy people are using Chrome? Or is it that if you change to Chrome, you become so efficient, your boss gives you an additional holiday? Where's the causality? Or is it just random chance? It's happened twice, 2 years in a row now. So what's the explanation? I don't know. And this is the operating system mix during August. So Windows 7, still leading, 8.1, doing great. 8, coming out. XP? And to my mind, it's not spying when we one day find out exactly which customers, which users at that customer are the ones running XP. And we contact them and tell them, you know what, XP has been obsolete, end of life for some time now. We are also going to end of life it and cease our support for it. So we are giving you an early warning. Please upgrade to ensure online keeps working for you. That's not spying. Agreed? Yes. And so, finally, a little bit about all of this, like the online environment, which takes a lot of work to develop and keep running, this too becomes its own thing. And of course, we are measuring and monitoring our monitoring systems. Because we have seen that other people's monitoring systems, without naming any names, have from time to time consumed a significant amount of resources on the machines they were monitoring, which is not really a good thing. How do we know it doesn't happen to us where we have to monitor ourselves, right? Who guards the guardians? And so we are taking in about 250 samples per second on average, and we are spending like 1.5% CPU on the server that collects all of that, which is good. Well, of course, you keep doing that for some while, it piles up. That's 1 million samples per hour. That's 8 billion samples a year. So big data, yeah, keep doing this for a couple of years, we'll probably qualify. And of course, the reason we are keeping this is we can do retrospective analysis, we can do forensics, we can do what happened last week. Has this happened before? Who experienced this? And data storage is cheap enough that we can actually afford doing it. But condensing it to something useful, doing the analysis, that is something that takes a lot of work. Now, I don't have a slide for that, but I should add that one of the things we're keeping track of is partner calls to our online programming interfaces. So we are counting how many calls, how much time do we spend processing them, how much CPU time do we spend processing them, how much database traffic are we generating. And that's partly to protect ourselves and partly to help you optimize your applications. And as Jens was saying, that we expect you to be to have access to some parts of the operations center system. This is one of the parts that you will be able to see, the graphs that show you how your applications are consuming resources in the online system. So that's going to be one of the services from us to you. Okay? Got that? Any questions? No, you wouldn't dare. You can try in the bar. That's fine. I don't bite.
Thank you very much. Thank you. When he was talking about saying that he would stay here all night, he could stay here all night and talk about that, but you probably couldn't. He wasn't kidding. When you don't find Modric working with statistics or analysis of some sort, you might find him in some Canadian cave somewhere, 3-4 miles deep. But those are the two places he loves to be, and that's just fantastic. We're lucky to have him. The next thing I want to talk about is the security aspects of SuperOffice Online. Every single partner that has an app that's existent in the App Store today knows just how serious we are about security. Imagine our security is breached. Something hits Twittersphere, Facebook, it's out there. What sort of damage does that do to us? It's pretty significant. We did a little bit of research, and we came to discover that it's not necessarily our infrastructure, our servers, our access to networks, and the internet that is our weakest link. I hate to say it. I don't want to. I wish it weren't true. But our partners are our weakest link. Our connectivity and your connectivity, your accessibility, all of those, the integrations between our online and your environment are our weakest link. And we are paranoid. We're scared. We really don't want to get to the point where we have to answer questions as to why didn't you think of this? Or why didn't you do that? Can you imagine? Security is huge. In today's world, nobody's secured, not even if you're disconnected, believe it or not. So we want to take a few minutes to share with you some of the experiences that we've had with our security experts to inspect our system internally and share with you some of their experience and give you a little bit of highlight as to what you can expect as a partner when they start to shed their light on you in order to get through the certification process. So with that, let me go ahead and introduce Christian from WatchCom, our security experts.
Thank you, Tony. Can anyone hear me? Does the sound okay? All right. So about 2 years ago, SuperOffice came to the conclusion that they were paranoid. So they decided to bring in us, WatchCom Security Group, which everyone is working there is even more paranoid. So for the past 2 years, we've been working internally at SuperOffice continually with security, trying to secure all of the components of the online environment, SuperOffice's internal systems, and well, as you see the community page, everything needs to be secured. What we've been doing to accomplish this are several activities. We've been working closely with a lot of teams internally, doing things for like code reviews, design reviews, to actual security testing of the applications. And we feel that this is what needs to be done in order to maintain the security of products like SuperOffice. All the information in the online environment is extremely valuable to all of SuperOffice's customers and your customers' customers. So, for you to enter that sphere, you also need to go through a certification process. And as part of that, we have designed a security evaluation of you as a partner and your application that you're going to communicate with the online environment with. So tomorrow I'm going to have a session on security, web security in general, a little bit more about how the certification process works from our perspective and how we audit you. And I'm also going to show you some demos of how attackers work, what attackers are out there and how they do their attacks, and what steps you can do to prevent attacks and introducing vulnerabilities into your software. So, one of the key focuses when you develop web applications are the OWASP Web Application, Open Web Application Security Project. They categorize vulnerabilities into several categories. And during our testing, we focus a lot on these vulnerabilities, and we want to show you some of these, what they are, how you can defend against them, and what the attackers do to exploit them. So I'm not going to keep you for long, so please join our session tomorrow at 2 o'clock, and thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Although I've been known from time to time to be able to induce a little bit of pain into people, today's not one of them. So I know that this is getting pretty long in the tooth. It's a pretty long day. We've had lunch. The air in here is a lot better than it was in 2013, but it's not perfect. So I would like to take 15 minutes break, and then we'll come back and talk about, and finish up what it is we want to show you. So let's go ahead, take 15 minutes, come back here at 3:25, and we'll get started again at 3:30.